name is Monit Kachawa, and in today's session we will start 9702 paper code 42 of October-November 2020. Before going on, please read all the instructions mentioned here. These are the datas and the formula which is already given to us. Let us start with the very first question. Define gravitational potential at a given point. So we know that work done per unit mass for moving it from infinity to a given point is known as gravitational potential. The key words here are work done per unit mass and from infinity to the specific given point to us. That is the answer for definition of gravitational potential. This is the mathematical expression. Phi denotes the gravitational potential, which is equals to minus capital G m by r, where G is the universal gravitational constant, m is the mass of the object, and r is the distance which we have moved from infinity to that point. So work done per unit mass is said to be as gravitational potential. The minus sign denotes that as you are moving towards the surface, because we are taking maximum at the infinity, so as we are moving towards the surface, the potential decreases. Okay, so this is of 2 marks. If you are not written from infinity, you will lose your mark. 1 mark for work done per unit mass and 1 mark for the from infinity to a given point. Now the second B part. The earth may be considered to be uniform sphere of radius this, and the mass is also given, which is given that it is concentrated at its center. A satellite of mass this is launched from equator. It is placed in an equatorial orbit at a height of this above the earth's surface. Now in the first part, we have to calculate the change in the gravitational potential energy of the satellite for its movement from the surface of the earth to its position in the equatorial orbit. I always say to my all students that always whenever we are supposed to find out the change in gravitational potential energy, only remember one thing, that forever the change is, it will always be final potential energy minus initial potential energy. Okay, and we know that the formula for the potential energy is nothing but the minus G capital M small m by r. So this R2 denotes the final position and R1 denotes the initial position. Now here the sign are very important. As you can see here, I have taken common G M M, I have taken common. So this minus and this minus gets plus, so 1 by R1 minus 1 by R2. Now these are the value which is already given in the data. You can see 6.67 into 10 raised to power minus 11. Capital M is the mass of the earth, which is 6 into 10 raised to power 24. Small m is the mass of the satellite, which is already taken, 1 upon r1. R1 is the, you can say it is coming to the earth's surface, so the radius, because we have already considered that the mass is concentrated at its center, so the r1 will be the radius and r2 will be the radius plus the height from the earth's surface, because this is given from above the earth's surface. So maximum student, what they will do is they will take R2 directly as 5.6, and that will give you a wrong answer. Okay, so the answer will be adding 6.4 plus 5.6, that will be the R2. That is the you can say the final position. So putting up all the values and calculating, you will get the answer as 7.0035 into 10 raised to power 10 joule, rounding off, and you will get 7 into 10 raised to power 10 joule. Okay, fine. Now question number 2, second part of the same. Determine the speed of the satellite when in orbit. So whenever the speed of the satellite we have to calculate, what we are doing is we are equating the centripetal force equals to the gravitational force. So you will get an expression for V, that is under root g m by r. Just putting up the values, r will be the distance from, because we are calculating for the satellite, so we will take the distance for the satellite from the center. So that will be, this is 6.4, this is 5.6. so putting up all the values, you will get 5800 meter per second, rounding off to two significant figures. So 1 mark for the equation, 1 mark for the substitution, and 1 mark for the final answer. Here in the previous question also 3 marks. So 1 mark for the equation used, 1 mark for the substitution, and 1 mark for the final answer. Okay. Now the C part. Before the satellite in B is launched, its speed at the equator due to Earth rotation is given to us. Suggest why the energy required to launch the satellite depends on whether the satellite in its orbit is traveling from west to east or from east to west. Okay, so smaller gain in energy if orbit is in the same direction as Earth rotation, that is from west to east. So there will be a smaller gain in energy if the orbit of the satellite is in the same direction as that of the Earth direction. Otherwise it have to do extra amount of work in order to rotate in the other direction, that is from east to west. So that is the smaller gain in energy. Fine. So we have completed question number 1. Now moving on to the question number 2. State what is mean by internal energy of a system, and that is one of the most popular question. You should remember that it is the sum of the potential energy and kinetic energy of random motion of particles of a given system. So the key word is the sum of potential and kinetic energy of random motion for a given system. Now the numerical part. An atom of an ideal gas, here it is already mentioned that this is an ideal gas whose volume is given to us at pressure this and temperature. These are the values given to us. You can see the flow chart. This is the initial conditions. We are supplying some sort of energy, that is 980 joule, and then we are getting the final. This is the volume, pressure, and this is temperature T. So the gas is heated at constant pressure so that its volume becomes this. It is heated at constant pressure. You can see here the pressure is not changing throughout the process. So the volume increases to 3.8 at a temperature T. So for a fixed mass of a gas, calculate the amount of substance in mole. So we know that what is the equation, ideal gas equation, that is PV equals to nRT, where P stands for pressure, V for volume, N is the number of moles, R is the, you can say, ideal gas constant, and T is the temperature. So we have to calculate the amount of substance in moles. So N will be equals to PV. PV is pressure. We are taking the initial stages. So in the question it is already given, it is pressure into volume. So pressure is 2.6 into 10 raised to power 5 and volume is 2.3 into 10 raised to power minus 3 divided by R, which is a constant whose value is given in the data sheet. You can refer from there, and temperature, that is 180 Kelvin. Putting up the values, you will get your answer. So 2 mark, 1 mark for the equation used and 1 mark for the final answer. Okay. Now find out the temperature T in Kelvin. We know that if it is an ideal gas and it is at a constant pressure, we can use this equation, and by this also you can consider if temperature is constant, so this will, sorry, if the pressure is constant, then I can say V upon T is constant. So initial and final ratios of volume over temperature will remain same. So V1 by T1 is equals to V2 by T2. T2 I have considered as T. So T will be equals to V1 T1. Sorry, just a second. T2 I have taken as T. So it will be V2 times T1 upon V1. So V2 is, it has increases its volume, that is 3.80. This is V2, this is T1, and this is V1. So putting up the values, you will get your answer as 297 Kelvin. So 1 mark for this equation and 1 mark for final answer. Now in the C part, during the change in B, the thermal energy supplied to the gas, you can see here the thermal energy supplied is 980 joule. So we have to determine the work done on the gas during this change. Explain your working. So work done, we know that it is pressure times change in volume. So work done, pressure is 2.6, which is constant throughout the process, and the change in volume, that is final volume minus initial volume, so you will get 390 joule. Now it is very important here, student, in my previous video of 4.1 of the same series, you can, if you have not seen, you can see I have provided the link in the description where I have discussed this, the sign taken for the work done. Okay, so here it is also mentioned, explain your working. So the work done will be negative as volume of gas is increasing, it is expanding. So in that video I have explained in detail that if the gas is expanding, we will take the work done as negative, and if the gas is compressing, its volume is decreasing, then the work done will be positive. So here we will write minus 390 joule, not plus 390 joule. So 1 mark for this, 1 mark for the explanation, sorry, 1 mark for the this work done carrying out, 1 mark for the explanation. So if you write plus 390 joule, you will lose your 1 mark. Okay, so this is an important question. Please remember the sign for the work done. Always remember one thing, if volume is increasing, then the work done will be negative, and if it is decreasing compression, volume is decreasing compression, then the work done will be positive. Okay, now determine the change, that is delta U internal energy of the gas. Using the law of thermodynamics, change in internal energy will be equals to the Q, that is the thermal energy supplied, plus work done. So here the thermal energy is supplied, so we will take 980, and the work done will be minus 390 because it is expanding. So you will get 590 joule, and if you have not taken minus, then you will get a wrong answer. So this is of only 1 mark. Fine. So we have completed question number 2. Now question number 3. There is a simple pendulum given to us with a metal sphere suspended from a fixed point by means of a thread. You can see the diagram here. Some dimensions are given to us with the values. The sphere has a mass of 94 gram and is displaced to one side through a horizontal distance 12.7 centimeter. The center of the gravity of the sphere rises by 0.90 centimeter. The sphere is released so that it oscillates. The sphere may be assumed to oscillate with simple harmonic motion, that is the SHM. Okay. So what is mean by the SHM? The first question. So this is a type of oscillation in which the acceleration of a body is proportional to its displacement. Also, it acts in the opposite direction, because when the metal is moving in the opposite, let us say it is moving, it is released from this point, so it is moving like this. So the acceleration of body is proportional to its displacement. How much displacement you will take, the acceleration will be proportional to it, but it acts in the opposite direction. So displacement is in this direction, so the acceleration is in this direction. So they always act in the opposite direction. That is the important concept. So this is of 2 marks. One is proportional to its displacement and the 1 mark is in the opposite direction. Here's the expression. A is directly proportional to minus x, where x is the displacement, A is the acceleration. Now the B first part. State the kinetic energy of the sphere when the sphere returns to its displaced position. When it will return to its displaced position, you can see here it will be in a state of instantaneously state of rest, so the velocity will be 0. So at the maximum point we know that the kinetic energy or the displaced position is shown here, it will be 0 joule. Now calculate the total energy of the oscillation. Now we can say the total energy will be the maximum potential energy that has been displaced. So you can see here the maximum potential energy, whatever be the total energy will be because of the change in the gravitational potential energy, and it has reached the maximum, which is 0.9 from the mean, or you can say from the undisplaced position. So that will be mgh. M we have to take it in kg. G 9.81. H is already given, that is the vertical height. Calculating, you will get 8.3 into 10 raised to power 10. Sorry, 8.3 into 10 raised to power minus 3. It will be minus 3. Wait, yeah. 8.3 into 10 raised to power minus 3 joule. Now use your answer in the second to show the angular frequency omega of the oscillation, that is 3.3 radian per second. So we know that the total energy will also be equals to half mv naught square, which is the you can say velocity at the mean position or the vertically down at this position. So half mv naught, we have the relation between linear velocity and angular velocity, or v naught is equals to omega x naught, where omega is the angular frequency. So putting up, now in the previous part we have calculated the total energy as 8.3 into 10 raised to power minus 3. Half mass is already given, it will be omega square, and x naught is the displacement, maximum displacement, which is, you can see here, it is 12.7. So putting up all the values, you will get omega as 3.3 radian per second, which we have to show. So the 1 mark for your equation, substitution and getting the correct answer, we will get 2 marks. Now the C part. The time period t of the oscillation of the pendulum is given by the expression t equals to 2 pi under root L by G. We have to determine the value of L. So we know that relation between time period and the angular frequency, that is t equals to 2 pi by omega, or omega is equals to 2 pi by t. So replacing this all, substituting the values, you will get L equals to 0.9 meter. So the 1 mark for this relation between the time period and the omega, 1 mark for correct substitution of value, and 1 mark for correct answer. So you will get 3 marks. Okay, fine. Now question number 4. State 2 advantages of the transmission of data in digital rather than analog form. Look, this is the basic question from the communication system. Always remember few points related to the advantages of digital and analog. So signal can be regenerated and noise can be removed in case of digital. Signal can be encrypted. Signal can be checked for errors. Digital circuits are more reliable and cheaper. Digital data can be transmitted at a greater rate. You can write any 2 points. Okay, fine. Now the next. An analog signal is to be transmitted in digital form. The transmission system may be represented in block form. Analog signal, now it is analog to digital convert, and then it is transmitted at the end, receiver end, it is again converted to digital to analog, and we get the output as analog. So the variation of the time period of the input analog system is signal is given to us. It is already given that time interval is 0.1 millisecond. Now consider this table 4.1. These are the values on the x-axis, these are the values on the y-axis. So you can just match up the values at 0.3 millisecond. The answer is 3. So 3 millivolt, already it is in millivolts, so I have written 3.0. At next 0.4 you can check, it is 4.8, and at 0.5 it is perfectly 1. So I have completed the analog signal column. Now the digital signal, now you have to convert the analog, these values, into digital. Those who are from computer science background, they can easily do it, but those who don't know, I will just tell you how to convert your analog into digital. For example, first of all, what you are supposed to do is write down this sequence 1, 2, 4, 8, and we have to convert into 4 bits only, so we will write 4 only. If you want to extend, this will be 16, 32, 64, and so on. So the value given to us is 3. So what we will do is we will choose a number which is less than 3 from this sequence, that is 2. So we will subtract 3 minus 2, which comes out to be 1. So it is getting subtracted and we are not getting 0. So that is the reason why we will take as 1 where the 2 is. So I will write 1 here. Now 1 is left, so 1 will be subtracted by the next number, that is again 1. So 1 minus 1, again it is getting subtracted and we are getting 0. So we will write 1 again here. Rest all the columns will be 0, 0. So we will get 0, 0, 1, 1 as the digital conversion of the signal having the value 3. I repeat once again, those who don't know, that is the number given to us is 3. So we choose a number from this sequence. The sequence is 1, 2, 4, 8, 16. You have to just multiply it with 2. Okay. So the number is 3. So 3 minus the number which is just less than in the sequence, which is 2. So it is getting subtracted. So we will get 1 here. Not this one. It is only getting subtracted. We are getting some value. That is the case. We will write 1. So remainder we will again use, and then we will use the next term, that is 1. So 1 minus 1, again it is getting subtracted, so we will write 1. We will do this process until and unless we are not getting 0. Okay, fine. You can see here in the next 4.8, so we will consider it as 4 only. So 4 minus 4, so we are getting 0. So again 8, 4, 2, 1. So 4 minus 4 we are getting 0. So 1, now we have already reached 0, so all others will be 0. So for the value of 4 we will take 0, 1, 0, 0. Always remember, we will take 4 only, the number which is just before the decimal. We will not round it off in case of analog signal. Please remember this. And the last one, 1 minus 1, so only 1 here, rest all will be 0. So this is the case how you are supposed to convert your analog signal into digital signal. You can practice over it you can check for this also. Okay, so underline the least significant bit LSB in the digital signal for the time of 0. So here you can see at 0.20 the least significant bit, significant, so this is not significant, so the least significant figure I have underlined here, which is 0. Okay, so this is of 1 marks and 3 marks for the completing of table. Now the C part, the analog signal of 1 millivolt, the single bit from the output of the digital to analog convert correspond to an output signal of 1 millivolt. Okay, So output signal is of 1 millivolt. Assume that the conversion and transmission do not having any time delay. So on the axis of 4.3 show the variation of time with the digital to analog converter. Now we have already been converted. So from 0 to 0.1, you can see here from 0 to 0.1 we have 5.0 to 0.1. It has been 0, so I have taken 0. Now from 0.1 to 0.2 I will take 5.7. so I have already given you that we will take only the number which is before the decimal, that is 5, so it will be 5. From 0.2 it will be 6, then 3, then 4.8 is 4 only, and then it will move to only up to 0.5 we have to take, so it will be like this. Okay, so this will be the answer for the graph. 5. What is mean by a field of force? A region or space where a particle and experiences a force is known as a field of force. For example, electric field, gravitational field, these all are the forces of field. Okay, so 1 mark for a region or space where a particle can experiences a force, and you can say that for example of electric field or gravitational field. Now state one similarity and one difference between electric field due to a point charge and gravitational field due to a point mass. So what is the similarity? That they both follow inverse square law. If you have the formula for the force, it is K Q1 Q2 upon R square. K is nothing but 1 upon 4 pi epsilon naught, and for gravitational it is G m1 m2 upon R square. So they are both inverse square law. It means they are both proportional to 1 upon R square. Both decreases with distance. As you increase the distance, the field decreases. Okay, so both are radial. You can write any one. And the difference, gravitational field is always attractive in nature, that is, it will attract both the masses, whereas the electric field can be towards or away from the charge, that it may repelling or it may away means for the positive charge it is away, and for negative charge it is coming towards. Okay, so that is the field difference. Okay, fine. Now the B part, the radius is 0.15 meter. It is in a vacuum. Find the electric field strength at the surface of the sphere is 84 volt per meter. Find the charge Q on the sphere. So we know the formula for the electric field, which is Q upon 4 pi epsilon naught into R square. Now putting up the values, you will get your answer 2.10 into 10 raised to power minus 10 coulomb. So 1 mark for the formula used and 1 mark for the correct substitution, getting the correct answer. Now the second part, the electric field strength at a point P at a distance x equals to 0.45 meter from the center of the sphere. So we know that electric field is 1 upon 4 pi epsilon naught R square. So we can consider a point P. So we can say E is inversely proportional to 1 upon R square. So at point P it will be 1 upon RP, and we have taken the ratio so that 4 pi epsilon naught get cancelled out. So this will be the ratio. I can write it down in terms of E. P stands for electric field strength at point P. ES is the electric field strength at surface. RS is the radius at surface or the radius of the sphere. RP is the point or the distance between from the surface to the point P, from the center of the sphere to the point P. So the distance is already given, 0. From the center. So 0.45, 0.15 is the radius. Rest all gets cancelled out. And ES is 84, which is given in the question. So EP, that is the at point P, the electric field strength is 9.33 volt per meter. So the 1 mark for the relation finding out between the point P and point at the surface, and 1 mark for the correct answer. Now use the information to show the axis the variation of the electric field E with distance x. So you can see here, until inside there all the charges are residing over the surface, so there will be no electric field strength in the center up to the surface. At the surface it will go to 84, which is already given in the question, and then it will be follow the inverse square law and it will go continuously decreasing. Fine. So you can see here at a distance of 0.45, you can check 0.45. This is the point where we are getting around 9.33. So you can see this is the 10, this is 20, so this will be 10, so the somewhat here it will be 9.33. I make a small cross, it will be 9.33. Fine. Now the question number 6. Define the capacitance of a parallel plate capacitor. This is also a common question. So it is defined as the ratio of magnitude of the charge on any one plate, because both the plate are having the same charge, just they are opposite nature. So I have written the magnitude of charge to the potential difference between the parallel plates. So C is the capacitance, which will be equals to Q by V. So you have to write the keywords are ratio of magnitude of the charge on any one plate to the potential difference between the parallel plate, or you can write the mathematical expression also. Now state three functions of the capacitor. This is also a common question. Okay, so you can write any three. It acts as a temporary power supply. It is using for blocking DC. It is used as an oscillator. It is also used for smoothing the AC current. Okay, so these are some of the basic functions of the capacitor in an electric circuit. Now this is a simple question. We are provided with three capacitors having each of 12 microfarad. Draw the diagram for the combination of 18 microfarad. So you have to use the formula for the combinations of capacitor to get the answer 18. So you can see 12 and 12 are in series, so they will give you a combined capacitance of 6. Then 6 and 12 are in parallel, so they will add up and they will give you 18. So they follow the just opposite to that of the resistors formula. Okay, I hope you know the formulas for the finding out the equivalent capacitance. Now 8, so 12 and 12 will give you 24. 24 and 12 are in series, so 24 into 12 divided by 24 plus 12, so you will get 8 as your answer. So this will be the combined capacitance of with using 12 microfarad to get an answer equivalent to 8 microfarad. So you can see this both are of 1 mark. Now question number 7. The electrons in a beam are traveling at a high speed in a vacuum. The electrons are incident on a metal target, causing X-ray radiation to be emitted. The variation with the wavelength of the intensity I of the emitted X-ray radiation is shown in figure 7.1. Explain why there is a continuous distribution of wavelength. For this you should have a better understanding how X-rays are produced. Then only you can understand or answer such type of problems. Okay, so I have just, this is not need to be drawn, I have just put it here in order to explain you all. So you can see here, these are the high speed electrons with a typically provided with a very large potential difference. This is the metal target. So when these electrons are coming towards the metal target, the atoms, or you can say the atoms of the metal target, the nuclei of the metal target, when they are electrons are coming towards the nuclei or the atom of the metal target, they are getting deaccelerated, because you know that around all atoms are having some electrons orbiting towards around the nucleus. So when an electron is projecting towards the atom, it is continuously getting deaccelerated, and the photon energy is being reduced in form of the radiation. So you can answer in this manner. X-ray photons are produced when electron is deaccelerated as it gets attracted towards the nuclei of the target metal. So this is the first point. And thus larger deacceleration result in larger photon energy. It will radiate the energy. And there is a continuous range of deacceleration, so we get a continuous spectrum of wavelength. So we get a photon having different continuous wavelength. But you can see here are some spikes there at various intervals. So at certain wavelength there are narrow peaks of increased intensity. Explain why. So what is happening? I've just added an animation here to show you how this is happening. For example, let us say an fast moving electron. You can see a fast moving electron is coming. If you observe this animation carefully, look, this has struck with this atom and it has moved this atom. You can see here this atom has been moved by striking with the fast moving electron, and second electron or from the other orbits comes down to the lower state to take the position of the emitted electron and radiated an equivalent amount of energy between the different levels. So we get a peak. So when an electron in the inner shell of the target atom is excited by collision with the incident electron from cathode, that is from cathode here, an electron, fast moving electron, when targeted the inner shell electron off by collision, then the electron will de-emit, causes emission of a photon, and this de-excitation, this is what the yellow color shows, is the de-excitation have discrete energy levels. There is a discrete energy level between different orbits of an nuclei of the target metal atom. So discrete photon wavelengths are obtained. So that is the reason why we are getting peaks here. So this is an important concept. Okay, so you can write in this manner. I hope you get a better understanding why we are getting continuous distribution of wavelength and why we are getting sometimes a narrow peaks of increased intensity. So that is the reason. Now the question number 8, an op-amp question. What is meant by infinite bandwidth and infinite slew rate? These are some of the properties or the characteristics of ideal op-amp. So an infinite bandwidth means that it will amplify signals of all frequency and should have therefore infinite bandwidth. We consider an ideal op-amp to amplify all signals of all frequencies. Okay, but in real or in practical situation it is not possible, but we hope, or we can say we suggest, that an ideal op-amp should have this characteristics. Infinite slew rate means an ideal op-amp change the output instantaneously as the input is changed. That is, there should be no time delay. So these are the keywords: amplify signals of all frequency and the change the output instantaneously as the input is changed, or no time delay. This is of 1 mark each. Now this is an amplifier circuit given to us. So you can see here the values are given. The resistance of resistance R is to be fixed so that for an input potential difference V in, this is the V in of 0.4 volt, the V in of 0.4 volt, the amplifier is on the point of saturation. Now here comes an important question. The saturation is the condition where we are getting an output voltage equivalent to the supplied voltage, that is 5 volt in this case. So determine the gain of the amplifier circuit. What should be the gain so that we reach the saturation limit? So we know that V out will be 5 volt in case of saturation. So the gain formula is V out upon V in. So the gain 5 upon 0.4, this is 12.5, rounding off to significant figure 30. So 1 mark for considering V out as 5 volt and 1 mark for finding out the gain. Find the resistance of R. So as we know, this is a non-inverting amplifier. It is the Vin is connected with positive terminal. So for non-inverting amplifier, the gain is equals to 1 plus R1 divided by R2. R1 is nothing but the feedback resistance. You can see R is the feedback resistance and R2 is the 800. You can see this can also be like, generally we have diagram like this, so don't get confused. This is the same diagram. It has just changed the you can say the annotations are changed. Circuit diagram has been a little bit changed to get confused to the student. Anyway, so applying this formula, 12.5 we will take as the gain. 1 plus R we have to calculate it. This is 800. So 9200 ohm will be the resistance R. So 1 mark for the formula using for non-inverting amplifier and 1 mark correct substitution and getting the correct answer. Question number 9. A small coil is placed close to one end of a solenoid. You can see this is a solenoid and a small coil is placed. The plane of the coil is normal. This is placed in such a manner that this plane of the small coil is normal with the solenoid, with the normal to the axis of the solenoid. Okay, and the solenoid is provided with a power supply. The power supply causes the current in the solenoid to vary according to this graph. So you can see here the current is less, or you can say 0 just before one box of the T1. It rises for two boxes. You can see here it is rising for two boxes. Then it is at constant. Then in one box only it gets changed to 0 again. This is the change in the current by the power supply in the solenoid. First part, state the Faraday's laws of electromagnetic induction. This is the common question. We all know that the magnitude of the induced EMF is directly proportional to the rate of change of magnetic flux linked with the coil. This is the Faraday's law. So please remember the law as it is. It is very important. So this is the mathematical expression. E is the EMF induced, and is the number of turns in the solenoid. Delta phi over delta T is the nothing but the rate of change of magnetic flux linked with the coil. Now on the figure 9.3 we are supposed to show the variation of the EMF induced in this small coil. So we know that EMF will only induce until and unless there is a change in magnetic flux, and the magnetic flux is changing due to the change in current. So current we know that is changing in two boxes here, so the EMF will be induced for this time period only. Again the current is constant. Now there will be no induced EMF. It will be 0 because there is no change in the magnetic flux. Again you can see it is changing in only one box and it is decreasing. So the EMF will be induced in the opposite direction, and that too just double because it is changing in only one box. So the magnitude of the EMF induced will be just twice of that of the previous one. So this is an important concept, students. Please remember this. I repeat again. Here it will be changing for two boxes, so the magnitude will be like this. Will be changed for two boxes, but the magnitude I have taken is 1 times. Let us say it is 1 times. And for the T2 it is changing in only one box, and that too decreasing. So the EMF induced will be in opposite direction and double of the magnitude. Why? Because it is changing in less time, just half of the time of the T1. Okay, fine. So it is of 4 marks. Look at the marks. 4 marks. Now in the B part, the small coil is now replaced by a Hall probe, and the Hall probe is positioned so that the reading we are getting is a maximum. The current in the eye in the solenoid varies again as before, which is shown in the figure 9.2. Now on the axis of 9.4, sketch a graph to show the variation with time t of the reading, that is the Hall voltage of the probe. Okay. Now Hall voltage will again when there is no current, there is no magnetic field induced, so there will be no Hall voltage develop. As the current increases, Hall voltage will also increase. It will remain constant because at that time magnetic field will be there, so there will be a separation of you can say the negative terminal and the positive terminal. So Hall voltage will develop until and unless there is a magnetic field, which is because of the current flowing in the solenoid. So again it will decreasing, so the Hall voltage will decrease and it will follow this type of curve. Okay, it is of 2 mark. Now the question number 10. A long straight wire A having a current which is moving in upward direction. The wire passes through a center of the horizontal card. The card is viewed from above. The card is shown like this. The current is coming towards out of the screen, or if you draw it on your paper or you are having a question paper, it is coming out of the plane of the paper. We are supposed to draw the magnetic field line produced by the current carrying wire. So we will use right hand thumb rule. I hope you all know how to use right hand thumb rule. Place your hand in the direction of the current flowing in the wire. When the fingers will wrap in this direction. So we will draw magnetic field lines, but the important point here is that the magnetic field lines will be more closer towards the around the wire, and as we are moving away from the center of the wire, the magnetic field lines will be further away with the concentric circles, and the arrows will be anti-clockwise. So I have shown 4 magnetic field lines which are, as I am moving away from the center of the wire, the distance between the circles are increasing. Okay, so this will be of 3 marks. 1 mark for the direction, 1 mark for concentric circles, and 1 mark they are farthering away from the center of the wire. Okay, now there are 2 wires A and B having this direction in the same. They are parallel and carrying the same direction. Okay, explain why a magnetic force is exerted on each wire. So we know that a magnetic force is exerted because a current is flowing in each wire which creates a magnetic field at the other wire. Also the current in the wire A and B is 90° to the field, which causes a force. And the direction of the forces are attractive because each force will towards the other wire. Here the force will be like this, will attract here like this. So they will be attracting each other. The current in the 2 wires are not equal. Explain whether the magnetic force on the 2 wires are equal in magnitude. This is an important question. Yes, the magnetic force are equal in magnitude because they are forming the Newton's third law of pair, action and reaction, and we know that action and reaction are equal in magnitude but opposite in direction. And also you can mention in this manner, yes, they will be equal in magnitude because the forces acting is proportional to the product of both current, therefore the forces are equal. When we are calculating the forces produced, there will be a product of both the currents flowing in wire A and B. So either you take 2 or 3 or 3 to 2, the product will remain the same. So that is also one of the reasons. Okay, so you can write any one of the explanation for this answer. Now question number 11. Electromagnetic radiation is incident on a metal surface. It is observed there is a minimum frequency of photoelectromagnetic radiation below which emission of the electron does not occur. That is the photoelectric effect that we have studied. This observation provides evidence for a particulate nature of electromagnetic radiation, that is particle nature of waves. State 2 other observations associated with photoelectric emission that provide evidence for the same. So when we were dealing with the photoelectric effect, these are the conclusive points which provide the evidence for the particulate nature of electromagnetic radiation. That is, maximum kinetic energy of electron is independent of the intensity. How much intensity you are providing, there will be no effect on the maximum kinetic energy of the electrons emitting from the target matter. Okay, Maximum kinetic energy of the electron depends on the frequency. So if you are increasing the frequency, provided that is above the minimum frequency required for the emission, then the maximum kinetic energy of the electron will increase, definitely, because we know that E is equals to h nu. If you are increasing the frequency, provided this frequency is greater than threshold frequency, that is the minimum frequency required, so the kinetic energy will also increase, because the energy increases, it directly depends on the frequency. And one more I have written, no time delay between the illumination and the emission. As soon as the photon is incident on the metal target, provided it is having a frequency greater than the minimum frequency required, the illumination will occur at the same instant. There will be no time delay, which suggests that it is having a particulate nature of electromagnetic radiation. So you can write any two of the points. Now the B part. So here you can see here the lambda, 1 upon lambda is given, and here the maximum kinetic energy in the electron volt is given. Use this figure to determine the threshold frequency. So we know that at threshold frequency E maximum is equals to 0. So we will extend this line where it will cut the x-axis. I will note it down, that is 1.93. So 1 upon lambda naught is equals to 1.93 into 10 raised to power 6, because it is 10 raised to power 6. So using the relation between frequency and lambda, so f is equals to c by lambda. So threshold frequency f naught will be c upon lambda naught. So 1 upon lambda naught is already this, so multiplied with the speed of light, you will get threshold frequency, rounding off to two significant figure, 5.8 into 10 raised to power 14 hertz. So I hope now it is clear to you. 1 mark for finding out the lambda naught, and 1 mark for correct substitution and getting the right answer. Now in the second part, use the gradient of the line to determine a value of Planck constant. Explain your working. So this is an important part of this question. We know that E maximum, that is the kinetic energy maximum, will be equal to the energy supplied plus you can say hc upon minus lambda. Using the gradient, we can say y equals to mx plus c. Okay, so the gradient, I have taken these 2 points, one this point and one this point, using the graph. So y equals to mx plus c, y is emx. Comparing this equation with this, m is equals to hc. So we have to find out the gradient, Planck constant h. So m by c will be the h. First of all, I am calculating the gradient using the graph, because in the question it is mentioned use the gradient of the line to determine the Planck constant. So I hope you get how I write this equation. This is y on the x-axis, sorry, on the y-axis. This is hc by lambda. 1 by lambda is the x, plus c is the y-intercept, which will be in the negative part. So I have written minus sc upon lambda naught. Because we know that the equation is hc by lambda is equals to hc by lambda naught plus kinetic energy. So the kinetic energy will be hc by lambda minus hc by lambda naught. So this is where I am getting. Now comparing this with y equals to mx plus c, using the two values which I have shown in the graph. So putting up the values, you will get your answer. M equals to 2.0 into 10 raised to power minus 25. Now using this m divided with c, we will get the value of h, which is we know that 6.67 into 10 raised to power minus 34 joule. This is just a calculative part. You can check. You can take the screenshot also, and you can take the screenshot of graph also. If you want the PDF of this video, you can see the description for the same. You can contact me. Okay, now the C part. With a larger work function energy than the metal in B, sketch the variation of if there is larger work function. Okay, so what will be do? There will be a line which will be parallel to the given line, but the point will be slightly greater, or you can say greater than, because it is having a larger work function. What is larger function? Which means the frequency will be greater than, let us say it is B, let us say it is new metal, so we can say frequency dash will be greater than frequency of the B part or the old one. So 1 upon lambda will be greater than 1 upon lambda naught. So 1 upon lambda dash, I can say, or this is the old one, so this will have a greater value, so that is why I have taken it. You can take any other point, not necessarily that what I have taken you have to take the same. You can draw like here also, like here also, but that should be greater than 1.93. That's it. Okay, sorry. Now the last question, question number 12. Define nuclear binding energy. The energy required to separate nucleons, that is proton and neutrons, to the infinity. The two keywords are separating nucleons and that too to the infinity. Okay, what is mean by nuclear fission reaction? So it's a splitting of large atomic nucleus into small nuclei, resulting in increasing in the total binding energy. So splitting of large atomic nucleus into smaller nuclei and increasing in total binding energy, that is nuclear fission, which is just opposite of fusion, where smaller nuclei are combining together and increasing the total binding. In both the cases, there will be an increasing in total binding energy. Remember that curve like this. Okay, in both the cases we are gaining the binding energy. Now a student suggests that one possible nuclear reaction is like this. The binding energy per nucleon of the nuclear varies with the nucleon number. Use this variation to explain why the reaction would not result in overall release of the energy. You can see here. So the binding, you can see what is the element taken, iron, and iron is having the maximum binding energy in the graph. You can refer the graph from your book or from the internet. There you can find, I have not taken it here right now, but you can refer. So the binding energy per nucleon is maximum for the iron whose mass number is 56. Thus the product of splitting of iron must have lower binding energy. That is, the given reaction would require a net input energy. It will not release or emit any form of energy because it is the most stable nuclei among all the elements present on the earth. So if you want to split the atom of iron or the nucleus of iron, you will have to provide a lot of input energy. Okay, so this is the answer for the last part of the last question. I hope you get a better understanding of all the question of this series. If you like my video, please share with your friends and other classmates or teachers. And I also take online sessions according to your own convenience for one-to-one tutorials, weekly online classes, or if you have any doubt solving sessions you want, please contact on my WhatsApp, or you can email your request for the IGCSE, AS and A level physics, mathematics, mechanics part. Okay, I also take the IB physics. So I hope you liked my video. If you have any doubt, you can comment on the chat box. Thank you.